This conference will now be recorded.
They muted something, maybe for each other.
Don't talk.
Please mute yourselves for the time being. Thank you. Okay, since we don't have complete identification of everybody up on the screen, I'm going to go through and on a roll call, because it is 3 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order. And first thing we got to do is figure out if we got a quorum or not. Mr. Kaysen, I can see you. I know you're here. You don't have to respond. Thank you. Ms. Griever contacted me and said she would not be attending due to a family emergency in Dallas. Mr. Hoover, are you out there? I don't see him. I don't know who guest number 1 is. Okay. Mr. Perez, are you out there?
Mr. Chair, I seem to remember Mr. Perez sending an email when the agenda was sent out saying he had a conflict, but my memory may be faulty.
I don't recall, and he may not have sent it to me. Let's see.
He did not. I would have forwarded it. I'll look and see if it's in my inbox.
Yeah, please, if you would, because it's going to be close to whether or not we have a quorum or not.
You might try Jim again. I think he just signed on.
Jim's here. Mr. Kaysen's here.
No, Jim Guy.
Oh,
Guy's not on the committee.
he's not on the committee, ma'am.
Who is Lago Guys?
That's Letha.
Yeah, that's probably a community member, but
Okay.
Rob, I just got a message from Diane that the link, she's clicking on the link and she's getting an error message, so she's trying to connect.
Okay, good. All right. Let me finish through here. Freth, you're here. Ms. Aird, you're here. That makes 4 of us until we get another. So I will give it a few minutes. We'll give it 5 minutes max, and then we will, because we don't have a quorum yet.
Rob, I think that's 5 counting you, so we just need 1 more.
Is it? No, it's only 4 counting me.
Oh, that's
Linda,
right, Charlene is
Linda Freth, Jim, and me. I'm going to look at my email one more time while we're waiting to see if anybody has.
Well, and I don't see the email from him that I'm looking for. That may have been a previous month.
Okay. Let's see. Aaron, can I ask a question real quick? Since we need supermajorities for this, what is our quorum number?
We have a total of 8, right?
Yep, I think we need 6, don't we?
Right.
Yep.
We have to have 6 present, otherwise can't hold the meeting.
We have 7. There's 7 committee members, I believe, 8 if you count me, but I'm not a voting member. I think there's 7.
No, we have 8.
We have 8.
Yeah.
One.
2, 3,
This-
4,
That's the
5,
exact reason we added the 8th member. Was
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, we have,
okay. Sorry, my bad.
we have
Sorry.
8, but we only got 4 here. So if we don't have 2 more show up in the
Seems
next
like
5
none of us
minutes.
can count.
I know Diane.
Well, come on, Diane, we're rooting for her. I know Susan will not be here. I've not heard from Howard or Amadeo.
Yeah. Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I did find the message from Amadeo and where I forwarded it to you on 3/29. I will forward it to you again.
Oh, no, I believe you. I just.
Okay. So if that means we got to get Howard, or we know we have 2 that aren't going to be here.
Correct.
So we need 100% of everybody else.
So we need Diane to be able to get on, and we need Howard to show
Right.
up.
Actually, he sent it before I sent out the agenda, actually. He sent it out on the basis of preliminary packet email. That's why it shows up earlier than the agenda was posted. I have Howard's number in an email somewhere. He's got a plat in front of me. Let me find that.
Okay. In the meantime, let me ask Aaron a question. Aaron, I know we need 6 to vote on. There's Diane. Okay, just one more, Diane. That's all we need. Hi, Diane.
Wow. Hi, I had to restart my whole computer. I don't know why it was having a little fit here.
Yeah, they do that. Aaron, in the event we can't get, I know we need 6 people to vote on anything or to grant a variance, so that's what's required. Is that the quorum for a meeting as well? I mean, can we approve minutes or do anything with 5 folks here? You're muted. Aaron? You're muted. Didn't hear a word.
Of course. 9 times out of 10, it's the opposite. No, 2, you could consider minutes.
Right.
Those only have to be approved by simple majority, but anything else, any consideration of an application for a variance has to be.
I just spoke to Mr. Hoover.
Yes.
He's logging on. He got his meetings mixed up. He's on another board and he thought it was at 7 tonight.
Shalane said she was in, but nobody else is popping up on my screen. I don't know why I'm not seeing anybody except me and you, Rob.
We see you.
We all see you.
I saw you for a second. I saw you for a second, Aaron. So it's like I'm only seeing the person who's talking and myself. So I've got a setting that is wrong, I think, suddenly
Bingo.
for some reason.
Bingo.
I have a setting that is wrong. I want to see everybody. How do I do that?
The 3 dots should be a thing that either under, should be, let's see.
On mine, it's in the top right-hand corner.
Mm-hmm.
I have go to meeting help, go to meeting community, save logs, and what's new.
Do you have a little thing that shows people?
It's right in
Yes.
the middle on the very top. It says either view everyone or, and it has.
Yeah, mine
up and
says
down
view.
arrows.
Okay, I can do the arrows. Everyone. Okay, there we go. That's where it is. There. I'm alive. Okay, I'm here.
I'm trying to remember all this, on Zooms, it's up in the right-hand corner. On Google, it's someplace else.
This had never happened before. I don't know why my setting was suddenly defaulted to just myself and who's talking. Never had to do that, but now I know. I need to bring back the form. Okay, there we go. Guess what?
For those spectators just tuning in, we are waiting to see if Howard can get signed in, so we've got a quorum, so we can do something today. And he is on his way, so we hear.
I had to forward it to you again. He keeps picking up the wrong meeting notice. He keeps trying to log it into the other meeting, which is 2 days from now.
I'll let you keep dealing with that, Roy.
Oh, that's why they pay me the big bucks.
That's right. All right. I see his name.
O'clock.
Mr. Hoover, are you out there?
Mr. Hoover, I think the chair is waiting for you to confirm that you're here.
That I am. We see you, we don't hear you.
Okay, I
There
said,
you
I'm
are.
sorry, I saw 7 o'clock and that's what time I had my alarm set for, it's just before that.
Okay. Well, we are here. I count 6 of us applicants. Just so you know, that means it's going to require essentially a unanimous vote of everybody that's here today to grant any variances on your behalf. But we do have a quorum, so I am going to announce that this meeting is in session. The Board of Adjustments, Monday, April 5th, 3 o'clock meeting is starting at 3:19. The first item for consideration. Well, first of all, do we have any citizens out there that would like to make any comments regarding non-agenda items? Okay, just got a head shake from Mr. Roberts and nothing else. All right, I will take it from your silence that there are none. We move to the consent agenda, which only has on it consideration of approval of the minutes for December 7th, 2020. The minutes were in your packet. And all consent items are routinely passed with a motion, and there's only one thing on it anyway. So do we have a motion regarding the minutes of December 7th, 2020? I see hands waving and hear nobody.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you.
I second.
You second?
That's Howard.
Thanks, Howard. Any discussion? Anybody have any comments regarding those minutes? Okay. All in favor of adopting of considering approval of those minutes, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay. Any nays? They're approved, 6-0. Business items is next. Do we have any comments from the council liaison? Ms. Marion? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilor or Chairperson Durbin. I do not have anything to share this evening unless there's something that you all would like for me to carry back to the city council.
Okay, I don't think so, not at this time. Council Marion, you did request, and we did discuss last time, and I know this, and I'll bring it up again when we get to future agenda items, but it's your preference that we move these meetings to the evenings of Monday nights?
The last time that we met back in January, the question was asked, and I was one of the folks that expressed interest in moving this meeting later if possible. Okay. I think yourself and Ms. Janya-Pin were also interested in moving the meeting later.
Okay.
I don't know if others were or not, but it's got to go on the agenda.
I just wanted to make sure I had your comment on that, since when we'll talk about it when we get to future agenda items.
You got it, but I don't get to vote.
That's right. Okay. Without any other items from the council liaison, we will take up our first public hearing and action. The first thing on the agenda is variance number 20-1734-ZON-VAR, application for a variance granting relief from the requirements of Chapter 22 of Section 22, Chapter 14, the Lago Vista Code of Ordinances, to allow portions of an existing fence, wood fence, which was built without a permit, to remain out of compliance between 6 and 8 feet in height at 1909 Patriot Drive. Staff presentation, Mr. Jambor, the floor is yours.
Yes, sir. For those of you who may recall, when we considered this the first time, it was tabled for the specific purpose to address the idea that a portion of the fence had been repaired by the previous owner before this gentleman acquired it. And he was of the opinion that it was probably in excess of 6 feet tall as well. We sent the code enforcement official out there, and she got enough photographic evidence to suggest that that was indeed true. And so that if you were to consider this variance and want to approve it, you would need to apply it to both the pre-existing portion of the fence as well as the newly constructed portion.
Okay, so this is the one we heard in January and tabled, so you guys could get more information and find out about that old section, because we just didn't know, if I remember
Yeah,
right.
we weren't able to get right up next to it and measure it, but
Yeah.
we were able to measure a fence that is near it, and it seems very likely that it is in excess of 6 feet for sure.
Okay, so considering this tonight, we're considering both the new section that was built that definitely exceeds 6 feet, and potentially this old section which appears to exceed 6 feet. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir. That is exactly the way I would put it.
Okay. And do you have any additional information that you can provide to us, or what is the staff's recommendation?
Oh, I don't know that we have a recommendation for the
Okay.
answer. You know, once again, it's whether there was a physical attribute of this property as contemplated by the ordinance is the ultimate question that's in front of this board.
Right.
Covered that in the staff report.
Okay. Ms. Carroll, you have a point of order?
No, I had a question for Roy.
Oh. Okay.
Roy, was there any investigation into whether there was a permit for the other portion of the fence, or whether there was a variance ever granted for that portion of the fence?
Yes, ma'am. We checked. If there was a permit, it predates our use of MPN, which goes back to December of 2011.
Okay.
Nothing's been taken out since then.
Let's all right, let's give the applicant a chance to give their presentation, and we'll have a section to discuss and ask questions here in just a little bit. Is the applicant here today?
Yes, sir, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Are you the gentleman listed as Nathan Carroll, C-A-I-R-L?
No, I'm under, I logged in as guest 1.
Huh. Oh, I see you. Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Please go forward with your application.
Okay, let's see. Essentially, as Mr. Jamboy had said, that other portion was done prior to when we purchased the home, and so I don't have any information as far as when exactly the fence was built. In regards to the section that we repaired, we did not initially apply for the permit. Checking the website, fences were not listed at that time for needing a permit, so we went ahead and did our repairs as we stated in our letter, as the fence was dilapidated, fallen down, and wanted to make sure that we were making good proper repairs on our home. And so with these, we would ask that our variance be granted, as the fence is only shared between ourselves and the neighbor. It's not facing the road, and given the elevation change between our homes, that was the reason for the height. So it actually provided a bit of actual privacy to our home. We had previously submitted our, let's see, I apologize, I didn't have it in front of me. Our letter that we had originally sent with our application. I don't know if everybody did receive that last time or if it was included in your packet.
They did, and we've received it again in the packet again.
Okay, thank you. As we stated in our letter, having that bit of privacy would go a long way as far as my personal struggles with post-traumatic stress as a disabled veteran, I do believe that we meet each of the sections and paragraphs as far as our use of our yard and just our comfort in our home. So I hope that we had clearly stated our thoughts here in our letter and submission, and would ask that the board would approve our variance request for our fence.
Hey, Roy, this is Howard. I have a question.
Hang on just a second, Howard. Let's make sure
Okay.
that the applicant's presentation is over, and then we will get to the public hearing. And then we'll ask questions and discuss it amongst ourselves, if that's okay. Sorry.
Yes, sir. I don't have anything additional to add that we did not include with our original packet submission.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you were provided a list of the 7 things that you need to establish to get a variance.
Yes, sir, that is correct. And I believe we did include that in our letter as well.
Okay. And you also understand that the burden of proof is on you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay. And I would like to, at this point, I will open it up to the public hearing. Do we have any comments from non-committee spectators out there that would like to comment on this? I take it by your silence that there are none, considering I see no waving or tossing about. All right, now I will open it up for discussion. First, I'd like to state thank you for your service. And I'm sure the entire committee thanks you for your service, as well as the entire city. Howard, you've got a question? Fire away, sir.
Yes, this question is really for Roy. It was my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that if somebody is just repairing a fence that was permitted even years ago, okay, and they're just repairing it, they're not replacing it, okay, that they don't need a variance. They can just repair the fence and there's no issues here.
Yes, sir. Within certain limits, that would be correct. But in this case, obviously, in the process of repairing it, it was additional height was added to it. So that's not consistent with what you said.
Okay, so there was additional height added to the fence.
Yes, sir. It
Okay,
was,
do we know how much extra height was added to the fence?
well, it was 6 feet or below before, and it's above 6 feet now. It
Okay,
varied from
what's
6
above
feet.
6 feet? Is it like 6'2" or is it 7
It
foot
appears
5?
to be 8-foot planks, sir.
Okay,
And and it transitions between 6 and 8 feet. So there are several that are less than 8 feet. But
okay.
it appears to grow to a height of 8.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the committee, for the board, excuse me?
Yeah, I have one.
Mr. Kaysen, you're recognized.
So, you know, as a Vietnam veteran, I understand PTSD and I sympathize with it. My problem is trying to apply this ordinance or apply it to the ordinance. I mean, where it's certainly a hardship, but is it a hardship that this ordinance addresses? And I was wondering if Aaron could maybe speak to that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may weigh in.
Okay. So some of the difficulty with variances comes in establishing exactly what Mr. Kaysen is speaking about, which is the undue hardship factor. Undue hardship is not specifically defined in state statute, but there is case law on point that outlines what kinds of things illustrate what is considered undue hardship. There are kind of three main principles. One, it can't be self-imposed, it can't be financial only, and it has to relate to the specific property. There's one case that is a 2005 case that kind of gets us closer to what the courts have viewed as a hardship when it comes to looking at personal afflictions. The 2005 case of City of Alamo Heights versus Boyer talks about, looked at a situation where it was a setback variance that was being asked for, but it had to do, the hardship claim was allergies and reactions to sun and insects. And in that case, the court found that it was personal to the homeowners and it wasn't a hardship connected to the configuration of the land or the uniqueness of the property, such that it was sufficient to justify a variance. And so from that perspective, it's that type of thing that I think the board should consider when looking at whether or not there is a hardship. The clearer guidance is that the hardship needs to be something that's tied directly to the land. I do believe your applicant referenced the slope of the property, but then you would have to evaluate whether or not that slope would be such that it would, the difference in height, the difference between the 6 feet and the 8 feet is justified, because one of the other things you're supposed to consider is that if you were to grant a variance, you only grant the variance to the degree that is necessary to address the issue. So I think with that in mind, the law doesn't address or would not accommodate a condition such as PTSD. However, if there is such a slope, or you find that there is such a slope that 2 foot difference in height is justified, that would be the only appropriate avenue from a strictly legal reading of the ordinance and case law that might give you that. But that is, of course, for your consideration.
I have a question for the applicant as well. One of the things that we need to consider as well, and that you need to prove, is that there's no reasonable alternative to this requisite variance. In other words, is there any reason that you cannot plant some trees or shrubs or something that could give you additional privacy over and above the 6 foot? Although privacy is not really the issue here, because that is not one of the factors that we are to review. But a reason, if it's screening, and people are mentioning screening and views and seeing into your backyard, is there any reason that hedges or some bushy trees that obstruct the view at 6 or 8 feet would not be doable in your backyard?
Yes, sir. I'm here. As they mentioned, there were the stretches there where it did rise up. It is not a straight across 8 foot fence. It is just those sections to basically maintain that level and our I don't know how the best way to put it, but that just to maintain that level given our slope between the 2 yards in those 2 sections, which is why they're only in those short sections and the rest is the 6-foot fence or below.
Okay, any other questions? Ms. Carroll?
When I visited the property, it appeared that the fence got higher as the slope got higher. So as opposed to the slope going down and the fence getting higher, it was just the opposite. So the higher the slope got, the higher the fence got. So
I believe, ma'am, are you referencing the side with the new repair?
no, in the back, the area that was in question in the back from the last time, what was in question.
Okay, I see.
And the property, and on the side, we weren't able to access it probably adequately to judge the slope of the land, or I wasn't.
I'm not sure, ma'am, if that was just due to, or I'm not sure how it looks as much from the street. But as the yard slopes up, the slope does decrease in the fence. It is just kind of that middle section behind the neighbor's home. So it does, I think there's probably a slight area that it might, but it does taper down and slope downwards towards the top of the hill.
Any other questions? Mr. Kaysen?
Yeah, as far as the portion of the fence that was existing when he moved in there that's over 8 foot, I am assuming that we could grant a variance on that. I mean, we're certainly not going to require him to go out there and remove it. We could make it a non-conforming fence where he wouldn't have to do anything to it until it had to be replaced. Does that sound right?
Well, and this is a kind of an area that I think is kind of in question from the city's point as well. And that is, we don't know when it was built. In fact, as far as we know, it could have been grandfathered. I don't know. I don't know that he has the burden to prove that it was not grandfathered if we aren't keeping records past 2012. So that is, I think, a potential area that can be considered. And then, Aaron, you still out there?
I am. Sorry.
What do you have a comment on my last espousing of where his burden lies in terms of proving that he's I mean, is that understanding correct? I mean, we don't have records, so as far as we know, that fence could be grandfathered, and I don't know that that's part of his burden of proof in terms of seeking a variance. I'm just trying to get your input to make sure you're the municipal whiz.
So, so my understanding is he was originally seeking a variance for the part that he newly built, but because we took a look at the other part of the fence, we took a pause to look at the other part of the fence. If he is intending that this variance applies to all of the fence, then the burden is his to prove that all of the fence is worthy, the variance is justified for all of it. Now, if he's claiming that it's somehow grandfathered, I'm not sure why. If we may not have records of when the existing part of the fence was built. It could have been built like many fences in Lago without a permit. It doesn't mean that it's automatically grandfathered, just like, breaking the law just because you don't get caught doesn't mean that it was permitted, right?
That's correct. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that it could have been built before the fence ordinance was in place.
It's completely possible if we don't have any records to provide evidence to the contrary. I think that's a difficult call. I think part of what the board needs to focus on is what is he asking for a variance for? And if he's asking for a variance for the whole thing, then we have to look at what information has he provided for the whole thing. If he's not asking for a variance for the whole thing, then we just need to, then the board would keep its focus in consideration of the piece he's asking for. This one's difficult because it's a partial, it's only partially a new fence or partial of repaired fence. I don't know that our ordinances specifically address this circumstance. I'll say it that way.
Well, and I had this question last time. I just didn't bring it up because we tabled it. And I don't really want to impose any additional burdens on the applicant just because we took a look at it. And, all we learned was its height. And that's, so anyway, okay, Ms. John Joe Penn, you've got the floor, Diane.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Durbin. I have a couple of questions for clarification for the property owner, Mr. Alexander. And one is that, am I correct in, I was reading it, that the fence that is too high, is it a boundary fence with only one neighbor?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay, and then also where the fence is too high, and we have the specifics, the uniqueness of the property where there's a significant slope. Is the downward side of the slope your property or your neighbor's property?
The downward side of the slope is our property, ma'am.
Okay, because and looking at the last picture, it kind of looks like that if the main picture with the house and the yard on the right-hand side is your property, it kind of looks like that's the high side as opposed to the low side. So I wanted to be sure of the perspective on that last picture, number 4.
Well, he doesn't have the packet, Ms. John Joe Penn.
Oh.
I think we can
Okay.
clarify it though, there's apparently a wrought iron fence that runs along a portion of some property. Is that your property or your neighbor's?
That is our neighbors that was the existing pre-built fence that was coming to question. Well, that is that neighbor's.
So that the gray house is not yours.
Correct. Ours is the white home.
Okay, so it's
Mr. Chair,
yes.
there's a topographic survey. The aerial map includes 10-foot contours.
What page?
The applicant is correct. His property is lower than both of his neighbors.
I just I wanted to be sure what my perspective in asking that question.
And
because I think
that's the reason that's in your map, so you can tell things like that. That would be the document you need to look at.
I've been looking for a topo map on here and I can't find it. So any idea what page it's on?
Sometimes it's the map. I see it now. It's the map that has all the greenery and the green outline. I think I see some topographic lines there, but they're just really faint.
I see it. I got it. Okay.
Yeah. So then my question to follow up there is that on the first page of this agenda item, down at the section, the third section where it says relevant ordinance provisions and considerations, would like some clarification as to the applicability, because it looks to me like this particular ordinance may have some positive applicability to the property owner. Should I read it, or you guys know what? Can you see where I'm talking?
Yeah, the part about the slope is the one you're referring to?
Where it says relevant, on page 1, relevant ordinance provisions and considerations, it references the physically apparent and prominent deviations from strict compliance with zoning requirements to become legally non-conforming, allows for certain types to become legally non-conforming after a significant prescriptive period, typically at least 5 years. Potentially the older section of repaired fence might be considered to be within that 5-year period at the very least. The theory is that I'm sorry?
Well, what I was going to point out, that's referring to the statute in another state, not ours.
Well, it says some states or local jurisdictions.
Right, and we don't have either of those laws. I was, the analysis Mr. Durbin was going through, I was using that to compare our local requirements from what they do in other states to address this exact problem.
And basically that,
as irrelevant.
Well, it's not an ordinance that confines us or guides us. It's just an example of what they do in another state.
For purposes of a potential consideration in this, since so much of this particular agenda item is a little bit obscure in terms of the finite boundaries of the situation. I mean, it would seem to me it's in here as a possibility of consideration.
Well, and the converse of that is the failure of either the city council or the state legislature to make that expression means that they thought about it and rejected it. I mean, that's.
Wow, that's very, I see what you're saying, but that's incredibly subjective. And it would be
Well, right. That's the reason I put it in there, is to draw that comparison between states and localities that address it head on and ones that don't.
And
kind of leave parts of it open.
You understand what that means, and that means is that if you do it and you get away with it for a certain amount of period of time, it is then okay. And I don't know that anybody wants to adopt that particular thought process here in Lago. Mr. Hoover.
I have one question for the applicant. Have you talked to the individual behind you? And if so, what does he think about this 8-foot fence?
Yes, sir, I have. My neighbor on the repaired side that we did, I did speak with him before I made any repairs and just to make sure that he was okay with the repairs I was planning. And as well as the neighbor behind us with the existing fence, have talked to him on numerous occasions, and also when our variance was first sent out and we had the notification.
Thank you.
And I've reviewed, if you look in the packet, there's several responses to the send out. They were all favorable. There was no objections that I can see. Is that correct, Mr. Jambor?
I don't remember any. You're correct.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any. Ms. Carroll.
Yes, I just want to be sure that I'm reading this elevation map correctly. it appears to me that the high side of his property is where it's between him and his neighbor, and it gets lowest over by the street. Is that correct, or is it the reverse from that? Roy?
Now, what part of his property were you referencing?
Where the slope is, the lowest slope is the side by the street. Is that correct?
Yes. What I would call the southeast corner of his property, that's the high point, and it slopes down diagonally to the street from that.
So the highest fence is on the highest slope. Is that
Right,
correct?
the slope of the property, yes. It gradually slopes towards the intersection of Patriot and Owens.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
Excuse me, Mr. Hoover, did I answer were you able to hear me answer your question? I wasn't sure if I was muted or not.
No, you're fine. You answered my question. You talked to the other neighbors and everything else is favorable. So yeah, you answered
Okay,
my
thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Kaysen, did you have your hand up? Go ahead. You got the floor.
Yeah. So what I try to do is look for anything in the regulation that allows me to grant the variance. And I'm not really finding it here. But I do have another question. I mean, we have heard that planning and zoning is going to take up this fence ordinance soon. And, you know, there's no guarantees about how it's going to go, but we could come out with an 8 fence being legal. I'd hate to have somebody tear down a fence right now and, you know, 6 months from now, it'd be legal. So I'm wondering if, you know, right now, I don't see that I can vote to grant this variance. But if I vote not to grant it, can we do something like allow 180 days to bring it into compliance so that we have time to see what the outcome of planning and zoning's review of the fence ordinance is?
I think I can answer that. That is not really up to, that's not up to us. We've got to grant them or deny them as they're written. And in terms of whether they're enforced or not, that's going to be whether code enforcement goes out and writes him a ticket or not. And after that, it's going to be whether or not Ms. Silvera prosecutes him or not. So there are opportunities for discretion that we don't have beyond us. Mr. Kaysen, that's the best way that I can answer it. Aaron, can you think of a better way to answer that?
No, Mr. Chair, you're 100% on target exactly where that enforcement discretion lies with either the code enforcement or with the city prosecutor.
So we have to call him as we see him, Mr. Kaysen, and we have to rely on others for in terms of discretion. We unfortunately have very little on this particular board. Okay, do we have any more questions or comments? If not, I'm going to open the floor up to a motion. And I would suggest that whether you intend to grant it or not, that the motion be in the affirmative. You can move to grant this variance and then vote against it. The reason I'm saying that is that I think we'd like to give the applicants a full shot at it, and then as we vote on it, if we have reasons we're voting against it in terms of which particular element that's required that was not met, we can state them as we vote. That will give everybody a nice clean record, I think, and give the applicants the best and fairest hearing. So at this point, do I have a motion? Oh, Ms. Jonjo Pin, is it a motion or a question?
Question, just a quick question. In making the motion, is it at all possible to make the motion with a contingency, like perhaps get a foot difference? I don't know what the difference in elevation, that's something we don't know. If the ground level elevation on the inside of the fence, what is the difference in the ground level elevation on the neighbor side of the fence? Is that 1 feet, 2 feet, 5 feet? What is that approximate difference? And if it's at least 2 feet, is it possible for us to word the motion such that we would grant the variance for 1 foot, like 7-foot fence, as opposed to an 8-foot fence?
I don't
Do we
believe
have
so.
any leeway there?
I believe the best we could do on this one is I think, since there's a new portion and an old portion, and there's a potential question about the old portion as to how long it's been there, I think a motion could limit itself to the new portion that was built, if you wanted to. But I don't think we can get into measuring the heights in the neighbors' yards and things like that, because quite frankly, we don't have access. The applicant doesn't have access. And so, and I don't believe there's anywhere in the ordinance that says, you know, if the neighbor's got this big height discretion and that guy's discretion, we can, you know, the fence can be a different height. The legislative body, city council, if that's what they wanted, then that's what they should have said. And if there's going to be a new ordinance, perhaps they'll take it up and make it so next go around. But for this particular ordinance, it just says 6 feet. Do I have yes, Mr. Kaysen?
Is there anything we can do with the fence that was existing as far as having it be considered a non-conforming fence? Can that be part of the motion? In other words, it's non-conforming, and as long as it's not replaced, it can remain.
We did not cite that as a violation previously and still haven't.
I would suggest that we can, if you want to make a motion that's limited to the new portion of the fence, then I think that's fair enough. And you know, as far as the old portion, you know, we don't know if it's grandfathered. If somebody charges him with an ordinance violation, it'd be the city's. I know it would be the city's burden of proof to prove it at that time that it was not grandfathered. So I think if you want to make a motion that limits it to to the new portion of the fence, then I'm certainly okay with that.
Well, I can't do that if I'm going to have a motion in the affirmative.
Okay. Well, you can, and you can still make a motion and vote against your own motion. If you, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to give all applicants the best chance by putting forth an affirmative deal, and it also gives us the burden of stating, if we don't grant it, why. Because we want a clean record. Ms. Marion.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. I just want to ask a clarifying question just to make sure that everybody that's on the board understands what is being suggested here by when Chair Durbin is suggesting making a motion in the affirmative, and then you have the option when you make your vote of either voting yes to approve it or no not to approve it. But I just want to make sure everybody kind of understands what it is that he's recommending so that folks aren't confused. I don't want someone to accidentally vote one way when you intended to vote the other way. And I just wanted to make sure if anyone on the committee has any questions to please ask them now.
What I understand is he wants a motion to approve the fence, and then we either vote for it or against it. Is that correct?
Correct, correct. And if we vote against it, state at least one element that was not met. I think that will give us because I know Ms. Silvera has asked us in the past to make sure we give as clean a record as we can. And I think that does so.
I'll make that motion. I move
Okay.
that we grant a variance for the fence as it exists.
Okay, your motion is to grant a variance for the entire fence as is, correct? You're not signaling separating out the new section from the old section. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any amendments or seconds that they would like to offer?
I second that motion. That motion.
You second that motion? Anybody want to offer any amendments?
Question.
Mr. Casey? Yeah.
Your motion was for the entire fence?
Yes.
Her motion was for the entire fence.
So if it gets voted down, then the existing fence is going to have to be taken out as well.
If the motion is voted down, then the entire property is non-conforming. We're not ordering them to do anything. The
Okay.
entire fence is non-conforming, excuse me.
I would make a motion that we approve the newly built portion of the
Okay.
fence.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. So in parliamentary procedure fund, I believe the way this needs to happen, Mr. Kaysen, is it sounds like you want to make, because we haven't voted, we either need to vote on that or you can offer an amendment. I think you can offer an amendment that says you want to limit it to the new portion of the fence. Is that what you're thinking of doing?
Exactly.
Okay. That amendment is so offered. Ms. Carroll, do you accept that amendment?
Sure.
Aaron, I got this going right, don't I?
In accordance with the rules we've adopted, yes, the procedures we've adopted, yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ms. Carroll, I stepped all over you. Do you accept the amendment?
If the motion's amended, then we just need to vote on it, I believe.
No, ma'am. You have the right to accept his amendment or not. And then if it's not, then we can vote on it. And if there is, if the motion is not passed, then Mr. Kaysen's free to make another motion.
It's my understanding that he was not cited for the existing fence in the back of the property. So it's not under question by the city. However, if we do not pass the entire fence, he can still be cited for that portion of the fence at some later date.
Well, this has nothing to do with being cited. He wasn't given a ticket for anything, as far as I know. He might have been.
He was.
Oh, he was. But that's not before us right now. That's goes to the court.
Right. The portion of the fence that he was cited for was the portion between him and his neighbor on the side.
I understand that, but that's not what we're doing here today.
All I'm saying is if we don't grant him a variance for the fence that was pre-existing, then he could be called out on that at a later date. is not correct?
That's the discretion lies with other people. That's correct. Does that mean you do not accept Mr. Kaysen's
I
amendment?
think Diane
I have a
has a question.
question. Rob, I have a question.
Yes. Go ahead, Diane.
Not really a question, but a clarification. As my understanding with regard to the procedures, Ms. Carroll, as the originator of the motion, has the position at this point to either accept Mr. Carson's amendment or to say, no, I don't accept that, and I wish for us to vote as I proposed to approve the variance for the entire fence as it exists. So it's in Ms. Carroll's power to say, no, I would like to vote on my motion as presented, and I
That's
don't
correct.
accept that.
That's correct. I've
And then we
just
can
been
go
trying to
forward.
get a yes or no. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to get a yes or no out of Ms. Carroll. That's all I'm trying to do.
It just seemed that she was unclear of the, for lack of a better phrase, the power she has at this moment. Because if we don't approve her motion as proposed, then Mr. Carson is free to make a new motion with his amendment, and then we vote on that one. So at this point, what does Ms. Carroll, I understand you want a yes or no. What does Ms. Carroll wish to do with regard to her motion?
That is correct. Yes. Do you accept Mr. Carson's amendment?
It's Kaysen, and yes, I do
Jason,
accept.
excuse me. And yes, pardon me?
Yes, I do accept it.
Okay.
But to
All right.
exclude that pre-existing portion of the fence.
Correct. So Mr. Kaysen, everybody understand Mr. Kaysen's motion?
So in no way are we approving or disapproving the portion of the fence that was pre-existing. That's out of compliance.
Depending on how this vote goes, that's correct.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure everybody's got that and understands it, because isn't parliamentary procedure fun? Okay. All right. Everybody in favor of Mr. Kaysen's of approving the variance for the new portion of the fence that was just built, and denying or making no comment at all on the rest of the fence? All in favor?
Aye.
One for Ms. One, I count three, Mr. Hoover and Ms. Aird. Okay. All right. All right, the motion's going to fail. Mr. Kaysen, you can state why you didn't vote for it.
Condition number one, I think the slope is not a special circumstance or conditions in this town. I mean, everybody, or a large portion of people in this town have the same types of slopes. And I don't see it as being unique.
Okay. Let's see, who else is out there? We had three. Ms. Carroll. Yes,
Yes,
you're an A also, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what, for the record?
I don't think it meets the requirements of approving a variance. I believe it falls within what should be a 6-foot fence.
Okay. And I vote no as well, for several reasons. Number one is that I don't think that slope, unless the slope was created by a neighbor or a party or building, is a factor under the ordinance. I also believe that there is reasonable alternatives to screening, in that you can use flora and vegetation to do so. And this is, and I don't believe that, and I do believe that this violates the intent of the zoning ordinance, which is just to effectively have a uniform maximum height best they can for fences within the goals of the city's master plan. That's okay. That particular motion fails. Are there any other motions related to this particular property?
Mr. Durbin, although it's really moot at this point, I would just like to say that I thought we were voting on Mr. Kaysen's offering of a modification of Ms. Carroll's motion. I didn't realize we were voting on his actual motion. Voting on his actual motion, although it's already been, I would have voted.
No.
I would have voted not to approve it.
Okay.
Although
Right.
it
is a moot point. What the way it goes, and unfortunately,
the reason that it really is not does not meet the standard of a hardship.
okay. All right. And I have one further question before we move on to Roy, and that is, Roy, in looking at the map on page, well, we can keep looking at that topographical map.
58.
58.
Yeah, 58. The new portion that's over 8 feet, where is that?
It starts roughly at the end of the front yard along Patriot Drive and runs along that south property line.
Okay, so it runs basically along the driveway and keeps going back. What goes, does it go? It goes all the way back or to that little kink, right?
Yes, sir. But it starts, I don't know, 15, 20 feet back or so from the, from the front corner.
I can see where it hops up. Okay. All right. Based on that, I don't have any alternative motions. Does anybody else have any motions they want to put forward? Nope. Okay. And then this motion's denied as to that new portion with no comment on the old portion. Okay. Applicant, are you still out there? Applicant?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I just want to explain before we send you off, and I'm, sorry we weren't able to do any more, but that we are limited to some pretty strict interpretations on this board. But I wanted to let you know that what that means is, and we don't order anything, is that the fence is in non-compliance. And as I said, it's up to the enforcement folks as to what they want to do to you and whether or not you want to take the chances and wait to see if City Council changes the ordinance at some point in the future.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for coming. All right, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is 21-1762-Zone-VAR, application for a variance granting relief from the requirements of section 540 and 22 of chapter 14. The city Lago Vista Code of Ordinances to a type E wood privacy fence within the required rear yard setback of a double frontage on a through lot at 20908 Boggy Ford. Roy, you've got the floor.
Yes, sir. This involves what is normally a rarity in jurisdictions. It's pretty common in Lago to have not only double frontage lots, we have some triple frontage lots. The normal prohibition that sets up a requirement that all frontages that on a public right of way be treated as a front yard is because of the possibility that you will have driveways adjacent to them, as well as other people that have aimed their front yard in that direction, which will create a rather strange appearance where you have fences that are a setback that's 25 feet back, and then somebody with a 0 setback on the same property line. The applicant asserted, and we don't disagree, that there are no such adjacent lots on High Drive to them, and that there are no driveways that would create a safety hazard. So the question then becomes, as you guys are certainly adept at understanding, is that whether that in fact creates the criteria necessary that rises to a level of a hardship. Once again, there is an existing chain link fence that, as I appreciate it, will be left in place. And the sole purpose of this other fence is to create additional privacy in their backyard, that because of the slope, they basically have none.
Okay, and as I am looking at the map or the little plat on page 75, it looks like a little kind of a crescent shaped fence, almost like they're screening off from one particular house that might be to the northwest. Does that look
Yes,
right?
sir. But that would be my interpretation as well. But keep in mind that this isn't the worst fence permit application I've seen, but it's not the best either. So please don't have to be.
Okay. How tall a fence are they talking?
6 feet. There's no additional height they're seeking. It's just the location, and it's in front of the setback, but it's not on the property line either. It's
right.
inside the existing retaining wall and inside the existing chain link fence both.
Yeah, and it looks like it's about 5 feet from the setback line.
That's yeah.
In the words of the ordinance, it's 5 feet too close to High Drive.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Okay. Applicant, are you out? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Carroll.
I was unclear when I read the application whether the request was for a 6-foot fence on top of that wall, so it'd be the height of the wall plus 6 feet, or the wall being part of that 6 foot.
It's actually behind the wall, 5 feet behind it. So it'll be 6 feet from the ground behind the wall.
Okay.
Roy, is the ground filled in behind the wall?
It is a retaining wall, yes, sir.
Okay, so it is essentially,
there's some
for all
photographs.
intents and purposes, it's 6 feet on top of the wall.
Right.
That it's 6 feet from the ground behind the wall. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And how far inside of that wall is it actually?
They specify on the site plan that it'll be 5 feet.
5 feet inside the wall?
Yes, ma'am.
And the existing chain link fence is at what?
It's in front of the retaining wall.
Is it in the right of way? Where is?
Oh, no, ma'am. It's within their property line. It's immediately on the outside of the retaining wall.
Right, I can see on the picture, and I've been by there, but I'm just wondering how much of allowance has been given already, because it's obviously not 25-foot setback, so it's what, 15
Well,
foot
but
setback?
that fence can be on the property line. It could be further out than it is.
Because it's non-site obstructing. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. That is exactly right.
Okay. Any other questions for Roy real quick before we go to the applicant? Applicant, I assume that's Gary.
That's
Um,
correct.
Okay. Are you also Nathan Carroll on our picture?
No,
No, I don't know who that is. Okay. All right. You've got the floor, applicant.
okay. I understand the purpose of the ordinance. I mean, it's a good purpose. I understand that. Our argument is that the erection of this fence will not block any vehicle's view coming out onto the roadway.
Or the road itself.
On High Drive, from its intersection with Rock Terrace and down to Oliver Hill, which includes our property, somewhere around the middle, there are 5 properties that have vehicle egress from the back of their lots. And I drove down there and I stopped at every driveway and got out of the car and took a photograph looking towards our property. And the road is not straight. And you cannot see our property from any one of those driveways where it hits the road. And I submitted pictures showing this. The properties on either side of us do not have rear vehicular egress onto High Drive. So we say that the fence, it wouldn't prevent anyone pulling out from the rear of their property onto High Drive from seeing traffic come up and down the road, because they can't even see our property. So they couldn't see the fence from where they
We're so far back.
get out. Number 2, even if one of the properties on either side had a rear egress onto High Drive, the height of this fence is going to be so high that it's not going to block their view. It wouldn't block their view looking up and down the road.
Because it's so far back.
The top of the rock to the ground in front of the rock is about 4 feet. And then the property goes straight out towards the road, then dips down quite a bit, gradually comes up to the edge of the road, but it never comes up high enough to make up the difference. So the road is actually lower than the ground in front of the rock. So I'm calling that 5 feet that the bottom of the fence would be from the level of the road. Then I went out and in my garage, I measured the distance from the garage floor to about the middle of the driver's side window, and that's 4'6" so that any driver who was egressing from, even if either side of us had rear egress, would not be looking at the fence. His view would be below the fence onto the road, so that would not be a problem. And the ordinance in 22.25F says, which fence materially obstructs the visibility for vehicular traffic. Now the new fence, it's 23 feet from the edge of the road to the chain link fence. And then it's about 3 feet from the chain link fence to the stone wall. And this fence is going to be inside of the stone wall. So it's going to be so high up, it's not going to block the view for any traffic coming down the road. So I think from either point of view, it just doesn't obstruct the view of the road.
We have no privacy.
And it's true. We want it for some privacy from people walking up and down the road, cars coming up and down the road. We want it as a backdrop to plant some flowers and that type of thing. So we don't see how this fence would violate the purpose of the ordinance.
Okay.
Anything else?
I want to make sure you're concluded before I carry on.
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. I'm going to open the public hearing and see if there are any comments from folks that are not on the board but would like to weigh in. And
Yes, my name's
I saw
Nathan
Mr. Carroll pop up. Is that?
Can you hear me or see me?
I can see you and hear you, sir.
Okay, great. Hi, yeah, I'm Nathan Carroll. I actually live directly across the street from the property. I'm basically just here because I wasn't really sure what this was. And so it sounds to me like the fence is going to be on top of the rock wall. And I guess the few questions I have are, since the fence is going to be so far back from the road, I heard the chain link fence was going to remain. And I assume the property behind the wooden fence would still be required to be maintained, even though now technically the fence is further up into their property. And two, I don't know what the requirements are as far as which side of the fence needs to face the road or not. Personally, it doesn't really bother me that there's going to be a fence there, so I'd just like to state that for the record. The rock wall, though, from here I'm looking at it. It's not straight across the back of the property, so I don't know. I assume this is going to be some sort of curved fence. I was looking at the packet and the documentation. I could not see any diagrams or anything. I looked on page 75 you referenced, but so I assume this is just going to be a fence that runs along the edge of that rock wall, and it's just going to be a curved fence to follow the contour of the rocks.
You'll see a picture of the fence type. It's the horizontal slats. It will be difficult to make it curve because of that. So it's probably going to be straighter than what it's shown on the drawing.
Yeah, and curve doesn't really bother me any. Okay. I mean, it might be worth noting, and I don't know what the requirements are. And like I said, it doesn't really bother me, but from the road, if you build a 6-foot fence on that rock wall, that fence is probably going to be 20 feet tall from the road, but I don't know if that matters. And again, it won't bother me. I just was mainly here because I wanted to find out what was going on back there. I wasn't really sure of it. So,
Gary, tell them it's only partial fence, not the entire.
Yeah, the fence is not going all the way up the rock wall. The drawings and the builder is here. It stops roughly in front of the big tree, Mr. Carroll.
It's only a partial fence.
Right.
And it's not being built on top of the rock wall. It's being built on the grass in front of the rock wall.
Well, right, but it's being built closer to the house.
Correct.
On top of the hill, rock wall, whatever we want.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I just for the record, I live across the street. I don't really have any objections to it. So.
The reason we want the fence is because we have absolutely no privacy whatsoever in the backyard. There is, if you go in the backyard, there is absolutely no privacy. Everything is flat and wide open. So we just wanted an area where we could have flowers and have maybe a garden, a small garden.
Yeah, I would agree with
Okay.
that.
Anybody else from the public have anything to say? No? Mr. Hoover, I saw that your hand waved. Do you have a question for the applicant or for?
No, I have a question for Roy. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Roy, is that if the fence is not sitting on top of the wall, then it's not the wall plus the fence. It's only the fence itself. And I'm confused now because I thought this wall was, or this fence was, if it's inside the retaining wall, then the question becomes and the retaining wall is 25 feet from the street, how is the fence not 25 feet from the street? I don't understand.
Let me, you want me to address which part first? The street and the property line are in two different locations.
Any part you want.
Okay, this thing is about 5 feet in front of the setback. I think Judge Durbin's estimate was fairly accurate. That's about how much encroachment they're requesting. This fence could have been by right 5 feet back. The applicant is correct. It's not a complete enclosing fence. They're just erecting a partial screen. Now, as I mentioned, it's probably not going to curve as much as the drawing suggests. It's probably going to be straight sections based on the type of construction they've selected. But you are also correct in that, unlike a previous application that you guys looked at, where the fence was in front of the retaining wall and in addition to the retaining wall, and they wanted to deduct it, or even if it were built directly on top of the retaining wall, this one is quite a ways behind it. But more importantly, this retaining wall is of the 4 feet or less in height, where it's simply there, to keep there from being a slope on the grade. You follow me? It's so that grade change will be abrupt rather than gradual and probably erode for forever. That's what its purpose. So, in this case, the fence is not artificially higher by being erected on top of the wall. This is simply responding to a condition that's there, not a condition that was created for additional height. Did I help you? Okay.
Ms. Carroll.
For clarification for me and anybody else that may be confused, we are only considering this variance because it's within the 25-foot setback. Is that correct?
5 feet more and we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, if it was 5 feet closer to the house, we wouldn't be here, correct? Okay. I have a question. How long have you lived here?
Is it 4 years?
Since 2017.
Yeah, since 2017.
Okay. It's a good looking yellow dog you got up there on top of that retaining wall too.
Thank you.
Judge Durbin has good taste in dogs. That was my opinion. Exactly.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions? Mr. Kaysen?
Yeah, this is to the applicant. Why just, are you just fencing off part of the yard if you're seeking privacy from the fence? I mean, from the road?
I think there was plenty of room to put some flowers in and privacy and when you
There's a gate.
oh yeah, there's a gate down below and we're trying to find a guy to build some steps there because my wife goes and feeds the deer and we wouldn't want the fence to block that off.
Okay. And you wouldn't want to set it back another 5 foot?
Now the depth of the grass area of the yard is not much. Really would cut down the excuse me, the area we have back there. I don't know how deep is that grass, would you say?
Yeah.
Well, that's all right.
It's okay. It's not a very big yard.
No, it's not.
And by the time you plant a garden, if you move the fence back 5 feet and then plant a garden, then we'll have no yard at all for the dog.
I have a question, and that is, and your response there made it pop into my head even more so, and that is there some reason that you have not planted any sort of screening flowers, bushes, hedges along there?
We have planted some bushes along the far end of the property.
Yeah, but, and then I looked at your ordinance and it seems to prohibit tall shrubs. I mean, they take the same status as a fence from what I saw. And that seemed to be prohibited as well.
That seems a little nutty. I hadn't heard that one.
It's actually in there. We think it's nutty too.
Yeah, I believe it. I didn't. It just sounds nutty. But and sometimes on this board we get stuck with nutty. But okay.
Our grassy area, by the way, is 22 feet. The builder just measured it.
Okay. Mr. Hoover, did I see your hand up again?
Yeah, I just, I guess I'm still a little confused here. We have a 4-foot retaining wall, right, Roy? And that's set back, what? It's got to be about 15 feet from the road if this is only 20 feet, if the fence is only 20 feet from the road.
23
It's
feet.
23 feet to the fence.
Okay, so my question is, if you got a 4-foot retaining wall that's already inside the setback, and now you're going to put a fence 5 foot back from that retaining wall, I mean, Roy, what is the issue here? I mean, to me, it doesn't, I mean, you got a retaining wall at 4 feet, it's inside the setback, and now you want to put a fence 5 foot back, and now you make it 20 foot. I don't understand.
Well, and we don't disagree with you, but, as I mentioned, if there was adjacent property that was, fronting on High Drive or adjacent garages and driveways, we would not want the ordinance to allow this without scrutiny. So whether you guys approve the ordinance, I mean, the idea that the ordinance exists, I think is fairly defensible. Now, there are many occasions where you would want this not to be a by right situation.
Okay. Ms. Carroll, were you waving? Were you waving to get my attention, or were you swatting at a fly or something? Okay. I couldn't tell. Mr. Casey. You're muted, sir.
My husband was waving at me. I was just
Okay.
responding to him.
It seems like the ordinance probably is more than just the view of cars coming down the road, because, I guess you could have this side of the property could be a front yard as well as a backyard. I mean, in fact, if you go down the street, you see some that have their front yards, and so they definitely have 25-foot setbacks, and they're not allowed to put privacy fences in them.
Right.
So you could, if you didn't make it uniform, you could have one yard with one set of requirements and the next yard with a different set. So that's
absolutely true.
And then the other thing is, I drive down that street, I see 3 or 4 fences that are obviously within that 25-foot setback. I'm guessing that most of them are grandfathered. One of them, however, is a brand new fence in a brand new house. And I know we haven't given a variance. I'm just wondering if there's a permit. If so, how did the permit
Would you like to tell me what the address is while I'm writing?
Well, I had it.
Well, you can email me later. I'll find it.
But I just want to make sure that, you know, somebody didn't get a permit and then we're gonna, you know, maybe not grant this variance. If there's a way somebody got a permit, I'd like to know how.
Well, I built one of the fences that has the privacy all the way to Boggy, and their address is on High Drive. And it was approved 2 years ago. I'm not sure when this ordinance came into place, but I do have a permit for that one as well.
For which one?
It's one of the addresses that faces High Drive, but it backs up to Boggy, and it's got a privacy fence around it to the property line.
I've seen it.
There's
On High
three
Drive?
right next to each other.
I saw one too that, and I assumed it was grandfathered.
Well,
No,
if I
they're all-
may, I might be able to answer that for Mr. Kaysen. I've been on this road for almost 14 years, and I would say none of those fences could qualify as grandfathered. They're all new since I've lived here.
We will check them out.
Okay. Ms. Johnson Pin.
Thank you, Mr. Durbin. A point of clarification, I guess. It's if the purpose of this ordinance is, as I understand it, to prevent certain conditions, certain scenarios, environmentally speaking, with regard to the context of prohibiting sight vision on the road and so on, as described here on page 1. And allows the city to control that a fence is not built that would interfere in those things. If that's the case, and if we are satisfied that this particular fence would not infringe on any of those conditions as stated in the ordinance, then does that reasonably, is that a reasonable scenario for us to approve the variance as the ordinance has prescribed?
I think that's the question in front of you, although Mr. Kaysen is also correct by mentioning the aesthetic considerations.
Aesthetic or pre-existing?
Aesthetics. Once again, you wouldn't want an alternating series of fences that were on the property line and those that were 25 feet back because of the frontage that they chose to use.
But doesn't that already exist?
And to add to that, it's not all aesthetics. That can be a safety issue as well on these through roads.
And to lend credence to the previous discussion, the ordinance was a little bit vague a few years ago. I don't think we changed the substance of it, but we made it clear that the fence regulations apply to any double frontage lot as if they were front yards. It said that, but it didn't say it as clearly as it does now. So that may be responsible for some of the improperly permitted fences.
But if the fence does not block anybody's vision, how does it violate the ordinance, the purpose of the ordinance?
There's more to it than that. Like I said, there's, you can apply for a variance to get to have a side obstructing fence in the front yard, even on lots that aren't double frontage. So, the point being that I think the board is obligated to take each case, in the circumstances that are unique to each particular piece of property in the context as it comes up. I don't think we can predefine it.
Well, I agree with that. But any car coming down the road is going to be looking below the fence. So their vision is not going to be impaired. And
I don't disagree that the two primary purposes of the ordinance are not in play here. That's,
Okay, any other questions? Ms. John Joe Penn, did that answer your question? Did your question get answered? I kind of lost track of it the second you asked it, but I couldn't really tell whether it got answered or not.
No, it did get answered because, and especially because Roy just agreed that that particular aspect of the ordinance with vision and safety is really not in play in this particular instance, which is the kind of things that allow us, the purpose of our existence, that allow us to grant variances if there's reasonable conditions, reasonable exceptions, that we can be discriminatory. I mean, otherwise everything would be ironclad, black and white, and it's not. So yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Casey.
Just an observation that you know, in order to grant the ordinance, we have to find that all 7 of those conditions are true. So, you know, safety and vision is just one of those conditions. And that's the hard part of this, is that we have to believe that all of them are true.
Right. Is there any additional? I have an additional question, and that is, in looking at this, since you are substantially above the people down below you on the other side of High Drive, because that continues to slope down at a pretty decent rate, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
yes.
Yeah. Do you really believe you require a 6-foot high fence to screen the view for from you know, the folks on the other side of the street or on the street even, with the 4-foot
I wouldn't mind a 4-foot.
with the 4-foot wall there, it appears like have you considered a shorter fence? And your fence builder's there too, right?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you done any sort of because I'm looking at your picture with the dog in it, and I'm thinking, if that's a 4-foot high fence and you add another 6 feet, then, you know, or even another foot.
Pretty much the top of the chain link is pretty much level with the wall, and
Yeah.
it's a drop off. It's not too much of a slope. So basically you step off the wall and that's a 4-foot drop.
Yeah, I know.
If anything lower than a 6 foot, you would still be able to, you know, see. I mean, their porch isn't very high up off the ground. So a 2, 3, 4 foot tall fence isn't going to do much of anything.
And as it stands now, if you're standing on the grass, it's much like you're standing on a stage, because you're above the high drive, and everyone that walks by, you know, is watching you try to you know, plant a garden or do all of that stuff. So for privacy's sake, I think a 6 fence is warranted.
Well, yeah, but we don't really even consider that here. I mean, I live on a slope, and the 2 houses behind me are 2-story houses because they're on a slope, and so, you know, they can look almost straight down on us. We could put up a 15-foot high fence and we wouldn't have privacy. So that's really not the issue here. You know,
Well, it was the reason for our,
I understand that, but that's not even on our list of consideration. is people's privacy, because of the elevation differences here. There are some places where, you know, you have a smaller backyard and the people behind you have a smaller backyard. They got a 2-story house and you don't. And I mean, they can practically look down your chimney. So, you know, that's, but I understand that you're trying to get some privacy, and I don't begrudge you for that, but that you got to understand that that's not really even on our list of consideration.
I understand.
Go ahead, sir.
You know, Roy has already said the spirit of this ordinance is for safety. Okay. My feeling is he has said there's no safety issues here. Okay. So my feeling is, why are we shooting this horse over and over again when we've already determined that this particular ordinance was made so that if people were putting up fences that block people from seeing things down while they're driving down the road, that creates a different issue. Roy has already stated that none of those issues are in play here. So my feeling is the spirit of the ordinance is already been taken care of, and I don't see any reason not to approve this. I really don't.
Okay, well, you'll get a chance to make a motion here in just a second. Anybody else have any questions? No? Any motions? I'm opening it up. I'm going to close the public hearing and open it up to, well, any further discussion amongst us. Okay. Do we have
I'm having a hard time recognizing any sort of hardship other than his desire for privacy, which is not a consideration of ours.
Okay. Mr. Kaysen, I saw your microphone light come on there. You got something?
No.
No? Okay.
I think it was already on.
Okay. All right. Do we have any motion? Mr. Hoover.
Yeah, I'll make it a motion that we approve as requested.
I have a second.
I
Ms. John
second the
Joe
motion.
Ms. John Joe Penn
I
seconds.
second the motion.
I got you. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
1, 2. Okay. The motion fails. 2, 4, and it appears 4 against. Mr. Ms. Carroll, would you like to, you may have just stated your reasons, but please go ahead and state them again for, so we got a good clean record.
Well, I feel like he may have been able to make a case for some kind of hardship with the having 2 front yards and so forth, but privacy is not the issue that we have considered in the past and don't intend to start right now. So without any other hardships, I don't.
Extra looks of wooden.
So basically, I'm going to summarize your deal, and that is, you believe it fails under number 1 because there's really no special circumstances as far as this lot goes in terms of why it should be granted.
Correct.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, making sure that's okay. All right. Ms. Hare?
Yes, I'm also declining it because I don't see how we can legitimately approve it, because it does not meet the criteria that would allow us to approve it.
Okay, is there any specific criteria you believe in which it failed?
the hardship. There's no demonstrated hardship because there would be an alternative for privacy.
Okay. Mr. Kaysen?
Number one, no undue hardship that's specific to that property. And number three, I mean, there are reasonable alternatives. You can build a 6-foot fence on the setback, which will take up a little bit of your yard, yes, but you will gain your privacy. You can also do it with vegetation, plants, trees.
Okay. All right. Mr. Kaysen stated both of the reasons that I had listed, as well as the failure to demonstrate that there was any special circumstances regarding this lot in comparison to a vast number of lots within the city. Okay, the motion fails.
I just have one final question. Suppose we never used the word hardship and said we wanted to build the fence because we love the look of cedar wood. Would that have made a difference?
Not a bit. Not in my mind.
Yeah, okay.
But I'd also be willing to bet if you did plant a few, I don't know, oleander along there, I don't think anybody's going to give you a ticket for it. Or
I don't see the difference between having a bush or a fence. I don't see the difference between having to plant a tree and waiting for it to mature, which could reach even further than 6 feet, and the difference and having a fence that is well built and attractive. And I find it very difficult to understand how you are using aesthetics as an issue when the issue is more safety for the people and not privacy. We are entitled to have privacy when we own land. And I find a great deal of difficulty with your reasoning.
I'm not using aesthetics. I didn't mention the word aesthetics. And I don't believe any of the 4 people that objected did. But thank you very much. And
sign back.
Pardon me?
Do you want your sign back?
I have a quick question. So Ms. Carroll said that it was for hardship, but she said that we could have proved a hardship, but we didn't. So you know that there's a hardship there, but we didn't say it because we're not used to this and don't do this every day. And so you deny it because we didn't mention the hardship that you thought about?
Well, no, ma'am. Ms. Carroll's reasoning is that the burden to meet all of these particular elements that we're bound to is the burden of proof is on you. And
but if the burden is to know that it's there, just because we don't do this every day and don't understand exactly what you want us to prove as a hardship, what if they wanted to get a hot tub and wanted to swim naked? Is it a hardship for the neighbor at that point so they can, have some privacy so the neighbor doesn't have to see it?
Well,
Ms. Carroll said
I honestly don't think that would have made any difference either.
Front yards.
Okay, we're going to move on to item number, the next item on the agenda, which is future agenda items. I know Ms. Marianne and Ms. Jonjo Pin and I stated that this might be, and I know in Ms. Marianne's case, in my case, it's because we got day jobs that we got to go to. We aren't retired, and we would like to consider moving this to our meetings to later on Monday nights. And I would like to put that on the next agenda item, the next agenda. Does anybody else have other agenda items you'd like to see on here? Anybody At anything you want to talk about in the future, let's talk about it. Let's see if we want to talk. Let's see if we even want to talk about it. Yes, Ms. Carroll.
With the summer months coming up, I just wanted to FYI, we will be gone for the May and June dates of the board meetings.
Okay, we'll try to round up the other side, the other folks, and make sure that they show up. Oh, I know something that I'd like to put on a future agenda item. And Howard, you're ahead of the ball game on this, and that is I'd like us to take a look at the applications and make sure that we are getting word to these applicants that these are the 7 things that they need to concentrate on and prove to us, so that they have some guidance. And I know that they're getting a packet handed to them now, but let's take a look at it, and let's take a look at the actual application itself, to see if we can make sure that those are clarified, so that the applicants know exactly what they got to show us when they come in. Howard, you sent me some information on that, but I would like to put that on a future agenda, on the next agenda, to talk about, just because I think we owe it to the applicants to give them good, clear direction.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that this case here that we just had, he was upset about it, and I think it was partly because, you know, she didn't understand that she had to satisfy all 7 of those things in order for us to vote yes on it. Okay.
Exactly. I think we've run across that in every hearing we've had so far. So whatever we're doing, I think we need to try to figure out a better job. So I'd like to put that on the agenda next time.
I agree with Howard.
And I do have a question for Aaron, or something for the future. I'd like to know, you know, I understand that we have the 7 things that we have to satisfy, but in this last case, the ordinance was made specifically for safety reasons. There was no safety issues involved here, as Roy pointed out. So how does this really affect? I'd like you to give us an explanation later on of how does this really affect our ability to approve the variance, you know, based on the fact that the spirit was that it was protecting safety. Safety was not an issue here. So,
Howard, I mean, I'm not sure I agree with that premise. I don't know that its entire existence is based on safety. I do think there's some aesthetic tributes in terms of, you know, some fences, when you get a choice of which is your front yard and which is your back, some can choose one, some can choose the other, and you could have one of these deals going up and down like that. You know, you could have every other lot could go 5 foot, 25 foot, 5 foot, 25 foot. I mean, honest to goodness, with Boggy Ford where it is and as busy it is with all of these through lots, I think at some point somebody should have realized that somewhere and said, hey, as far as the people on Boggy Ford are concerned, High Drive is an alley, and that's how you need to get in and out of your house, because all those people backing up onto Boggy Ford lately is, I mean, that's a mess waiting to happen.
oh yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
We're not the city planners, so anyway, but I just not sure I agree with the premise that this is an entirely safety-based idea. But Aaron, you can go ahead and answer.
So I think we've maybe discussed this on a couple of different occasions. No matter what the reason is for why the ordinance was adopted, the conditions or requirements that must be demonstrated to grant the variance are the same. You just have to apply those to the specific conditions. In this particular case, they were asking for a variance from the setback requirements, but you still have to go through each of those 7 requirements, and the applicant has to demonstrate how they meet each of those, or how, what the justification is for each of those 7. So you can't consider one thing in a vacuum.
I got it. Yeah, that's why I think Ron's suggestion for future items with having the applicant understand that they have to satisfy all 7 of those conditions is really important.
We need to make it as fair for them as possible, because it's hard enough. Go ahead, Erin.
Mr. Chair, maybe this is the time to discuss possibly revisiting your recommendations to P&Z on what you think might be good things for them to consider as far as making adjustments to the ordinance, because they have to do the actual first step of the legislative process, meaning consider ordinance revisions that they would recommend to council to ultimately adopt. But I think that they would want to hear from you as a body. So maybe that's something that you might want to bring up. If you feel as a body that the 7 conditions are something that there might be good tweaks that you would recommend that P&Z consider. We had that joint meeting for the purpose of kind of enlightening them of the struggle that you have. And it's not really just the 7 criteria or the 7 items. Our ordinance with regard to variances goes well beyond what state law considers, what other courts would consider. So maybe at some future meeting, if y'all are inclined, you might want to have a discussion about what are your big tripping points, and do they need to continue to exist, or do you want to send a message to P&Z that they might consider making certain tweaks or recommending certain tweaks to council?
Ms. Johnson-Penn?
On that basis, because I was thinking the same thing or similar things as Aaron was pointing out, because it just seems to me, just in the little bits that I have heard, that this in a significant number of the situations, there are more than a few times when all 7 of those criteria are not even applicable in the situation necessarily. So what I was going to ask is to kind of amend the agenda item, that perhaps we can all, just looking in those agenda items, come back with a suggestion as to how we would amend those agenda items in reading the ordinances itself, and so that we could perhaps make a more specific proposal to the governing bodies that can actually change it. Like, give us a goal to come back to the next meeting with regard to those 7 items. Perhaps.
Well, it's we can put that on a future agenda if that's what everybody wants to do. I'm inclined to believe that variances should be quite difficult to get, particularly in a town like ours where there's no, one scheme, there's no overall development plan where, different builders that do different things, and I just drove down American Drive to go to the island last week, and I looked over, and on a perfectly flat lot, there's a great big 2-story house. And I looked at that thing and I was like, how the heck did that thing get built? There's no way it meets the height restriction. So, in a town like ours where builders will do what, they want to do, and, face it, they're going to be mercenaries for for the people that hired them, the people that they're building for. You know, I'm of the opinion that the variances should be pretty difficult to get, because
But
it's you know, A, we're not legislators, and B, the legislators themselves have set these rules down, and they were the ones that were elected. We weren't. So we've got, you know, if they did it wrong, then these folks need to talk to their legislators and say, hey, we all want 8-foot fences. But I don't know, you know, we're like umpires in baseball. We don't have to agree with the rules. We just got to call them as we see them.
But we're not, there's no mutual exclusivity in that, Rob. Considering options for changing and suggestions does not mean that there should be, we're suddenly going to make variances easy to be agreeable. It was just putting things on the table for discussion, which is also part of our job and part of what we originally said in one of our first meetings, and bringing things to the P&Z and working cooperatively with regard to ideas for potential changes. It's about the discussion, not about doing away or making variances easy to get. It's very subjective.
You and I need to have a lunch or an adult beverage someday, and and go through that, because we've got, I can fill you in on why we're doing what we're doing. The Board of Adjustments used to do a whole lot more stuff, and they kept taking it away, and they gave some to P&Z, they gave some to the Building and Standards, they gave some to the that used to be the Building Committee, which was that didn't do anything with building. It was the Sign Committee, and so things have gotten moved around, and you know, let's have a beer and talk about that one. But I don't disagree with you, but there's hopefully there's things afoot. Ms. Carroll.
Yes, I just have a suggestion that maybe Charlene, is that how you say it? May want to take to P&Z or even City Council, whoever makes the ordinances, that when it's like a double front yard, like anything between Boggy and High Drive is going to have a double front yard. And some of them, like Roy alluded to, will have a third one if they happen to be on a side street as well. So that really takes their yard down to almost nothing. But that being beside the point, maybe there's some provision that they can make once it's decided which is the front and which is the back, to make an exception if there's no safety issue, where that like the backyard setback could have been 15 feet instead of 25 in this particular instance, but the ordinance says 25. So, you know, to put it, you know, we had to go with that. However, there are lots and lots of fences on Boggy that are only 15-foot setback on that side front yard, as opposed to 25. So that might be something that Charlene could take back to the City Council, just to find some consideration for that double, triple front yard thing, that so they don't have to meet all these other criteria, as long as there's not a safety issue involved. And another thing, there might be some way to put something on that application that says privacy is not one of the hardships, because that seems to be everybody's issue.
So if I could, just really quickly, maybe either Roy or Aaron might be able to hop in on this, but I don't know that that's something I would necessarily take to council, Fred. I think that's something that, because that would require an amendment to the ordinance, right? So wouldn't that first have to go to like P&Z or someone to amend the ordinance? And then they would take it to council if they felt like there needed to be some sort of an amendment?
Right, whoever's making the ordinance.
But P&Z is an advisory committee. I mean, Shalane, if you wanted to sit down and write an ordinance and take it to City Council, you could do it. But generally they go through P&Z and let them put in all the grunt work or rewriting the darn thing, and hopefully think about it. You guys got enough to do. Plus, you got to approve everything they do anyway that we used to do here. So anyhow, but yeah, that's, any sort of a proposal could be made to P&Z, and yeah, they could work on it and take it on up, but and they might not. Jim, did you have your hand up a second ago?
I was just going to say, I think that this is a discussion that we ought to have about any proposed changes we would have that we can forward to P&Z. We probably need to have it sometime when we don't have other business to take care of, because it'd be lengthy.
Yeah.
And I'd really rather do it in person, once we start meeting in person again, than to try to do it on here and, having to raise your hand and all that, where we can just like hash it out. But we also need to be mindful that, everybody needs to understand there's a state regulation, which is probably a little more lenient than our ordinance, but there's still that regulation. And a lot of these things that are in our ordinance come from that regulation. So you can't just say, well, we want to do what we will with it, because you've got to abide by that state regulation. And then also consider, how you get consistency. If you throw it open to just the way we feel about these cases, well, I like this guy has a point and I'd like to see him get his variance. These people don't, then you don't achieve the consistency that we need to have. So those are just my comments.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
That just means that the ordinance needs to change if we're gonna be able to make those variances.
Yeah, that's correct. I think so too. I want to make sure we're helping out as far as Aaron. I know when I started here, and you had mentioned that you wanted to get as good a cleaner record as you can get on these, which is sometimes difficult. Hopefully, and I'm trying to do that with this new procedure. I hope that helps you some in terms of getting something to hang your hat on in case somebody's not happy down the road. That's really what we're trying to do. And there's two schools of thought on that, and that is either to give you something to hang your hat on, or give you nothing so that you can hang your hat on whatever you can find. So, but you seem to prefer the give me something to hang my hat on, and that's what I was aiming for. Is it helping?
I think it is, Mr. Chairman. I think the only thing that I would caution is limiting how people, I understand your preference for wanting to have a motion in the affirmative and having people explain why they don't vote against it. I think we just have to be careful. Sometimes a motion to deny with a clear explanation of why you feel it should be denied and a clear vote on that is just as effective. Kind of forcing folks to put out a motion in the affirmative, I think we saw today may make some folks feel a little uncomfortable. But I think once y'all have seen kind of how the chairman's method of approaching the issue, and you know that you're gonna, if you want to vote against it and you think that they don't meet the requirements, you have the opportunity to vote against it. It's there. I do feel like it helps. If we were on the flip side, where you were recommending approval, it's good to have some of that information in the record as well, because our ordinance requires that it be documented in the minutes. This is one of the boards where a record of just the vote is not sufficient. Our ordinance actually requires more than that, and so I appreciate each of you articulating your reasons why you're voting for or against an item. It'll certainly help to make the record clearer going forward. And if we do end up in a situation where someone challenges the decision, we'll have more than just a guess on kind of the basis for that. So thank you for that.
Okay, all right, and you're right. We could make it clear the other way. In addition to building a record, that a part of that is just that, you know, the folks that actually file a variance and file an application and come forward. I just kind of feel like we ought to give them a full, kind of give them the full hearing and full consideration, and that's basically why I had asked that we do it in the affirmative, not it, you know, because you can give it a clear record either way. But I having been on this committee before and on it again, and having served as judge, I appreciate it when people ask for permission rather than do it and then ask for forgiveness. So I kind of want to encourage that action. That's the other main reason for it. But yeah, we do want to make sure we give you a good, clean record. And in fact, if nobody brings a motion forward, it fails. And that can happen too. And then I think you know, that's always possible. I don't want to force anybody to bring a motion or bring about a vote, but I think that I think if we want to give them a vote, otherwise we're going to, I mean, if we want to build a complete record, then we got to give them a vote one way or the other, whether anybody brings a motion or not. And that's not anywhere in any of the ordinances or any of the procedures. So I'm trying to do it this way to encourage people to seek permission for doing things, and to it just feels a little cleaner and more respectful to the applicant, to me. But they may not think so after we just voted two of them down, but and you know, of course we will entertain any motion. I just asked that way, but because of that was my own preference and the way I was thinking. And I'd like to run since we have to say no a lot, I'd like to say we're going to give you a vote from the positive viewpoint at the beginning. So okay, if there's nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, any seconds? Ms. Carroll got her hand up first. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you all.
Rob,